Hey folks, Amanda here. Just a quick heads up that from time to time, the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast does include some adult language. So if you've got kids with you, you may just want to hold on to this episode to listen to a little later. Enjoy! Welcome back to the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast, the show for people who are ready to break out of survival mode in order to build a truly thriving life. I'm Amanda Solman, and along with Mark Jewell and the rest of my team here at Mark Jewell Speaking and Training, we break down common roadblocks that keep people stuck surviving and share ideas to help you thrive each and every day. Transparently speaking, I have been looking forward to this episode for a while because of how important the topic is. And while I'm not sure that excited is the right word, I am looking forward to finally being able to share it with you. Kenney is the owner of Alignment 8 Yoga and Cycle in Midland, Michigan. And while I could introduce her to you as my spin instructor, the reality is her story is so much more than that. Through a series of events that no one would ask for in a million years, Keri has had to learn how to work through unspeakable tragedy, rediscovering herself, and as one of my favorite Harry Potter quotes says, learning that happiness can be found in the darkest of times if only one remembers to turn on the light. In our conversation, Keri and I talk about trauma, processing it, and how even though you never get over it, it is possible to get through it. A quick heads up, Keri and I do touch on tough topics, including mental illness, homicide, suicide, and abuse. If those things are hard for you, please feel free to pass on this episode or make sure to take care of yourself as you push play. Also, if you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, please reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. And if you or someone you know is a victim or survivor of domestic abuse, you can find help at the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. That's 1-800-799-7233. Let's head over to the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Kenney to the show. Keri, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Awesome. So we are going to be getting into a tough but important conversation today. But before we get into that, help our listeners learn a little bit more about you. Who are you? What do you do? And just fill us in.
All right. Well, my name is Kenney, and I feel very privileged and very, very grateful to be here. I've had the privilege of owning a yoga and fitness wellness studio in Midland, Michigan, and just kind of been following the beat of my heart, my drum, and open to everything that this universe has to give us, which I was not there before. So everything that I have in this moment is nothing that I saw for myself, which is hard to hold on to, but it's also just a daily, again, awe of all the blessings I have. I am a big advocate of truth, justice, and peace. I really believe in the power of yoga, the transformation and healing power it possesses, and just the power that we intrinsically have as beings. And I'm just really aware of the human experience, the depth, the beauty, the pain, all that it can entail. So that's the work I'm doing in this moment of now.
Very good. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. So just, I guess, for background for people who are listening, I have been going to your studio for just over a year now. I got my email that said my 1-year anniversary. And, you know, I've loved coming to spin and to all of the different classes. And I've just enjoyed everybody's energy there. But one day during spin, you made some comments that made me go, whoa, there is more to this girl than I know. Like, what is the story there? And so, one of the questions I normally ask in that first question is, how did you get to where you are today? But I think for you, and what I've come to learn about you is that that's more than just an introductory question. So that being said, everyone who's kind of taken a glance at the title of this episode knows we're going to be talking about trauma, about tragedy, and how you continue to live through some of those experiences. And so, kind of going back to that question of how did you get to where you are, as much as you're willing, I'd love if you could share your story with us, because I think that's gonna turn out some really good insight and things for us to dig into as we keep going through this episode here.
Yes, absolutely. And the one thing to remember is that we all have story and we all have depth. And my story, it's taken a while to actually be able to hold it and appreciate it. But July 4th, 2013, my entire world just shifted upside down. And granted, everything affects everything. So as I share this story, just try to suspend the judgment of, oh, that's bad or right, any of that. But it is pretty terrible. I found my mother dead by my dad, and my dad in that moment was still alive, but he was not in his body. So I was the one who had to call the cops and the police, and it ended up being a homicide for my mother and a suicide by cop for my father. And in that moment, the walls caved in, the floor, the plates under my feet shifted. Everything has changed. And my safety net from these two beings who have given me so much love and stability and support, even through the dysfunction of their human experience. So alcoholism, addiction, shame, bipolar disease, you name it, we probably had it in our household, but there was still just a lot of love. And that's what's gotten me to where I am today. But so that was tragic in itself. I was 26 years old at the time. This July 4th will be 6 years. So, it's been process for me. But so I'm seeing this world now with my safety glasses, lenses are off. And it was totally, totally terrifying and disorienting. And then on top of that, people who you think are going to have your back and support you and love you and be there for you, turns out, they have their own stuff going on as well. So I felt very alone, and I say that, but I hold space for my husband because he was my fiance at the time, and he has loved me unconditionally through this, so I wouldn't be where I am without him. But he also gave me a lot of space just to sit with the depth and the darkness and the despair, and, I don't really, people ask, how did I get to where I'm at? And it has just been this felt sensation of trusting that I do not want to cause the harm that I experienced, trusting that I have within myself to move beyond this, but on my own time and in my own body and in my own pace. But that was the moment that just shifted everything. So I saw myself at that time getting married and becoming a registered dietitian and just like living this life that in my mind I had created. So that whole thing was just washed away clean. Fresh new script. And, I spent about a year doing nothing. I did finish school and I did get married and all that stuff. But for who I am usually like to be doing stuff and busy. But all I could do at that time was be. And that was the only advice I got from people who really loved and cared for me was, Keri, just be with yourself. There's nothing you can do in this space besides being. So I just rawfully and painfully let myself be and feel what grief feels like, what loss feels like, what pain feels like, what trauma feels like, and then I've just loved myself unconditionally through it. And now here I am. And things have just kind of been aligning for me since I just said, I put my hands up. And again, it took a lot of time to get to this point. But in the darkness, in the despair, I saw a glimpse. I saw some hope, felt some hope. And I said, you know what? I have no freaking clue what I am doing. But I am open to any guidance, any support that I can receive. And I feel like the universe in that moment just put its arms around me and said, you're going to be okay. Like, just trust. So that's all I've been doing. I've been cutting cords, and that means people, places, things that do not support my highest good. And my highest good is something that just resonates and feels good in my body. So getting out of my headspace and just feeling, right? Feeling, and being okay with being alone and just sitting with yourself and feeling that. So trauma is very real, and we go through many traumatic events. So that was like the big event that I can think of, but I've also been through a lot of different things. A terrible, unhealthy relationship in my early 20s to, I drank and partied and did terrible things, right? So we all make these mistakes, these choices, these decisions because we have free will. But then learning and about yourself and how like everything affects everything and it ripples out. So as soon as I was able to hold on to that and say, okay, if I own my breath right, I can own my peace, I can own this moment. And if this moment is all I have, well, this moment can be good. I can just enjoy this. And it's just been a very slow and sustainable path, I guess I could call it, my life now in this moment of just embracing what it is that I do have and not focusing so much on what I have lost, and understanding that love is boundless, limitless, and I can still feel that love with my parents, and it doesn't take away how much I miss them or need them or want them here, but I know they're with me and I know I'm supported, and this is my path. So I'm trying to know that I am more than this experience, this cluster of stuff. I have it in me to heal. And if I have it in me to heal, so does everybody else. We all have it within ourselves. So what I noticed was when I was going through all this pain is that there was almost like this reaction of pain upon pain upon pain upon pain, and we let this anger and frustration not connect us and unite us as supportive beings, family, friends, whatever you want to label it as, but I saw it more as an isolation. And I really saw how shame plays a huge role in isolating us. And then, you're in this painful moment, you feel disconnected, you feel disoriented, and now there's nobody there to support you. So that's where I started to find myself. And again, it is a 6-year practice, and now I'm in it for a lifetime of just loving this vessel, this being that is me.
Thank you. In
a nutshell.
Keri and I kind of look at each other and smile because, hearing stories like that, it's so incredibly powerful. Hey guys, Amanda here. For some reason, when I was fiddling with the audio while we were recording this, I missed a little bit of the interview. So what you're going to hear next is jumping back into the middle of one of Keri's responses to a question I asked her about how she defines trauma. So obviously, not all of us have had an experience like she has, or something that maybe we would define as really serious trauma. But the reality is we all have something in our lives. And so the first part of Keri's answer that I missed was she was sharing that trauma is really anything that causes you pain or suffering. So it might be something serious like the death of a loved one, or maybe suicide, or the end of a really serious relationship like divorce, or maybe it's the loss of a friendship or a car accident, or in some cases, even something as simple as going to the dentist might be traumatic for some people. So I'm going to jump back into her response, but just know there was some response on the front end that I accidentally cut off. And so you're going to come in the middle of her answer. All right, let's get back to it.
Anything that causes us any confusion, any sort of, disconnection is trauma. It also can show up in our bloodline, our lineage. I truly believe we come here to heal and to experience life and to take these emotions and evolve from them. But that being said, it is really hard when we're not able to tune into our emotions, when it's almost like we qualify, we label, that's bad, that's wrong. And it's just like we just got to feel, and we have to understand that there is so much depth to this human experience and so much pain. And a lot of times we're suffering in silence, and, that's even more disorienting and separating. So just understand that if you are feeling any sort of confusion, and with trauma too, sometimes we don't even remember that it happened to us, but it resides in our body, in our flesh, so it can show up later on in life through chronic illness, pain, cancer, just anything that doesn't feel good, it can show up. So that too can be very confusing. So to be able to hold space, to be honest with ourselves that yes, I have been through something and it totally sucked and I am totally confused and I don't like this. And to also hold in the other hand the compassion to just be gentle and to not to want to cause more harm. So one of the limbs of yoga is ahimsa, and that's one that I really hold on to, and that means unconditional love, non-suffering, just holding space for what is and loving what is. So that's just what I've been working on. But yeah, I do hear that so many times where it's like, because I hold that circle of hope on Sundays, and people will say, Keri, I want to go, but I don't know. And then they'll say what their quote unquote trauma is or is not. And my jaw will always drop, because it's like, that is trauma, my friends, and you're not alone. And the question I usually have for them after they say, well, I don't know if it's trauma, did it cause you pain?
Mm-hmm. So, because you mentioned it, I've been talking to a few people and mentioned that you do this Circle of Hope yoga. So I know this, if you're listening, this is a little interjection in the conversation, but I have been sharing this idea of doing the trauma informed yoga that you do. For people who might be interested or heard you say that in your answer and they're like, ooh, what is that? Can you just share a little bit about what that program is? And I've also heard from some yoga instructors who are like, ooh, what is that? So can you just take a moment and share how you're using yoga to help people work through trauma?
Yes. Oh, yes. This is where I get really excited. Yoga is the practice of uniting your mind, your body, and your breath, and bringing yourself into this moment. And trauma-informed yoga uses yoga, but also keeps in mind the human experience. So we're working with people's bodies, we're working with people's psyches. We have to remember we don't know everything that's in that space for that being. And with yoga, there's a lot of things where you can have hands-on assist, or maybe you say something, it can be very triggering. So with the trauma-informed yoga, everything is so intentional, meaning you want to create a space where you can come in with all your depth, all your shadow, all your light, all your stuff, and not feel like the odd man or woman in the room, but to actually be like, oh yeah, they get it, we get it. So every third Sunday of the month, we hold space at 12:30, and everyone's always welcome. It's donation based, and the money goes directly back into the community. So it funds trauma-informed outreach programs, scholarships. We were able to give out some scholarships to our last Teach to Transform Trauma Leadership training, which we'll have again this November. So again, lots to get excited about. But it's just holding space for people, for bodies, for psyches, for your whole self to come in. It's a traditional yoga sense. We have practice, we have meditation, we have breath work, but then we also talk about trauma-informed topics. So there might be a weekend of triggers, there might be a weekend on shame, there might be a weekend where it's in alignment with a holiday. So we talk about how life isn't linear, and it's a continuous cycle of ups and downs, and we hit this calendar year, and how does that feel and affect us? So there's opportunity to have your voice heard, which, let's be real, how often do we get to have our voices heard, our story heard? And only if you want to, because again, it's whatever you need and whatever you want in that moment. But again, no shoulds, no coulds, no woulds. After we share whatever it is we need to get off our chest, we take a deep breath together, honoring that person, honoring their truth, and we just move through it. when I started these circles, and even to this day, I'm about 2 years into it, and it's growing, which is amazing. But I even get very fearful, and I'm amazed every time anyone steps into the room, right? Every time I'm like, wow, you are so courageous. Because again, to hear trauma-informed yoga, to step into a space where you're like, I don't know anybody here. I don't know who this girl is. What am I doing? Like, do I really want to, bring fresh air and light onto wounds that we have just kept, burying deep. So I just celebrate everybody's courage. And it's pretty amazing. At the end of it, we got kind of like, we end the circle and people just sit there, right? We just sit there and it's like, can we just sit here forever? Because it's so beautiful. It takes a village, but again, trauma isolates us. Trauma dissociates us. Trauma lets us stay in this place of fear and freeze and flight. So to come in and to stick around and to bring your whole self in through the practice of yoga, again, tremendous bravery and courage, and healing happens 1% at a time. And I just feel so blessed to be a part of it.
And I've been to one of your sessions, and I can attest to how impactful it is. And again, I was in the same. I didn't know any of the other people who came, but just to hear them share their stories and to be brave enough to share in public, I was blown away. It's a really, really impactful experience. And so if you are someone who does yoga or you're a yoga instructor, I would encourage you to look into offering something like that or attending something like that in your community, because I'm very glad that it's something that you offer in our community. So thank you for that. I will come back to some of the other strategies I think that we can talk about in terms of processing and working through tragedy. But since you mentioned it, I wanted to take a time out and just make sure that folks know what you're referring to there. So you were saying some things there at the end about how trauma isolates us, right? Makes us feel alone. And so I'm wondering if you can expand on that a little bit in terms of what are some of the barriers that you see come up for people you've interacted with, people you've worked with, or maybe even for yourself, of what are those barriers to processing, right? So it's one thing to actually have the experience. It's an entirely different thing to work through that experience and get to the other side. I think there's probably a lot of people who live in that experience and that never really work through processing it. So, I'm just wondering if you can share some thoughts on what are the barriers that come up traditionally in the aftermath of the traumatic experience.
Yes. So we don't choose trauma. Like, trauma just hijacks us, but we get to choose and to really remember that we have a choice. Is how do we move through this? And sometimes we just need to stick in the depths, in the mud, and just experience that rawness and that despair. However, we cannot stay there too long, because it'll just destroy you. When there's a traumatic event, our nervous systems just totally feel the energy and totally feel hijacked. So just the entire way the brain responds, there's shutting down happening. We lose our Broca center, which is our language. We're not able to communicate. So right there, we're isolated from the get-go when something bad happens. Physiologically, our bodies want to release this energy, this tension of what we're feeling from this moment, through shaking, through convulsion, through, vibration. However, that's weird. That's strange. And we will, stop shaking. What are you doing? And I know from my moment, July 4th, 2013, my body was shaking, and I didn't even know that it was doing that, or that it was a real biological process of, we got to get this out. And animals do it, babies do it. We see this happen when they go through something crazy. They shake and then they're fine. But as human beings, that's weird. Stop shaking. And I remember being on the couch and someone, and I don't even know who, and it's okay because they were trying to love me, right? They were trying to be there for me, but they're like, oh, stop shaking, stop shaking. And then we medicate ourselves so we stop shaking. So there are ways to release and to get this out. Movement, body movement is huge. breath work is huge, and that's why yoga is, phenomenal for healing in all aspects of our life. That breath gets the energy in other places and we release it. The postures get our bodies into these spaces and we shake and we feel and we stick with ourselves. But again, we get stuck in that mud. Lack of support is the big thing that clicks for me, is the lack of support, the lack of someone to talk to, because again, not a lot of people want to talk about trauma or own the fact that maybe we didn't show up in the best way. There's just so much, everything affects everything. But I definitely think lack of support. So again, yoga reminds us that this me, this vessel, this union, this yoke, this is what's important, and everything within myself is everything that I need. So it's through these experiences, and the more dark, the more despair, the more we learn, and sitting with our emotions. So again, the isolation and lack of support, but then I also think on the societal level, we are really pushed to do, like get over this. And if I had $1 for every time someone said, "Aren't you over this yet?" I mean, we'd have a bigger studio. But and that's, it's the outside looking in. Haven't you gotten over this yet? And no. And I encourage anybody, if you're ever about to say that to someone, just think real quick, like, what would happen if you lost a limb? What would happen if you lost, a huge piece of yourself? You don't get over it. You get through it. And it just becomes like this really radical scar that you're like, yeah, I got through that. So when you feel those moments of nobody understands me, what is this? Give yourself the ultimate gift you can give yourself, which is your presence, your breath, your ability to feel. And again, trauma hijacks us in so many ways, but it hijacks the nervous system and it causes us to live in just our head space, which we cannot trust every single thought that we have. And then on top of that, I'm cutting off 90% of my being. So I'm not feeling anything from the neck down, and I'm living in this space of chaos, worry, dread, doubt, and creating a story that might not even be true. But again, I'm not going to judge myself for doing that, because that is human and that is biology, and that's just a way of fight, flight, and freeze. But knowing that that's where I'm at, I can start to come back down into the body, and you don't want to do it all at once. In the Teach to Transform Trauma Leadership Training, Catherine describes it beautifully. We're an iceberg, we're frozen, and you can't just unthaw the entire iceberg and expect to be okay. We have to just take a little bit at a time, and just, again, find people that fuel your soul. Cut cords of people who don't with love. They're on their path, you're on your path, and you are worth the work of healing.
I don't know if I've asked you this question before, but I'm curious, was therapy part of your journey back, or journey through, I should say?
Right, journey through.
Yeah.
I love that. It was a little bit, there was a lot of pressure right away. Aren't you going to see a therapist? Aren't you going to get a counselor? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't really know what I was doing at all. If you go the therapy route, I do think it's important to have someone to talk to that is, professional, has had education and experience. But I also think, again, trust your gut and your heart, because it took me probably 3 or 4 different counselors until I found someone that I was like, you know what, she actually cares. She's listening to me. She's holding space for me. And that's really what it's about, holding space for somebody and feeling that. So don't feel like you have to fit the box of going right to therapy right away. If it works for you, that's awesome. If it doesn't, that's awesome too. But I do at some point think that you should find people that you can talk to, connect to, and just be mindful that they are not shoulding you, coulding you, or woulding you, but they're just letting you discover what it is, how you need to move through this. Because you have tools, you have wisdom, and again, it takes a village, we got to lean on each other, but making sure that they're not enabling you to lose yourself in the process. if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think of some people, to your point, right? We get so in our head, we feel alone. And depending on what the trauma is, it is very hard to talk to some people, because even people with the best of intentions, just may not understand in a way that is helpful. And so I love that you said, find the right person. It's not just about, oh, you need to go see a therapist, but like, if you don't have people who can hold that space for you, that might be another option that's out there for people, for if they find somebody who's really good and creates that space for them. So I appreciate you sharing that. So we've talked about the circle of hope. We've talked about therapy as a possible kind of support system. And so I want to dig into a few more of these kind of, I don't know, strategies, techniques. I don't know what the right word is exactly. But in your kind of journey, I guess I'll keep using that word, journey. What are some other things that can help people? And then I'm kind of hoping maybe I'm not a journalist, so I can ask you a leading question of where I hope you might go. I was wondering if you could share the story about why you actually chose to open a spin studio. So I know we've talked a lot about yoga, but Alignment 8, which is the name of Keri's studio, you do a lot more than just yoga. And so I love the story that you shared about spin. And so I was just hoping you could share that as kind of part of maybe this answer.
Absolutely. And it kind of all ties together, which is really great. But I think it's so important. So if we put both our hands out in front of us, we have a scale, right? And in the right hand is our scale, our side of trauma and pain and sorrow and worry and fear and all those things that lay on that side of the life. And then on the other hand, the left hand, let's be honest, how much joy, how much fun, how much celebration, how much love, how much laughter and ease do we have in our life? So we really want to find this balance between the dark and the light, and appreciating both, because the dark moments in our life teach us our resilience. They the struggle wipes us clean, and there's so much to appreciate in the pain. However, again, you don't have to appreciate it right away, and you don't even have to appreciate it now, but maybe sometime down the road you might hold that with like, okay, because on the other side of that trauma is so many gifts. So again, our resilience. But then finding things that just speak to your soul and speak to your authentic soul. So knowing it is for you and only for you. So when I was going through, that first summer in fall, I was always a movement person. I loved to work out. I loved to run. I just loved that physical element of myself. But I noticed I wasn't moving as much, and I was actually just, staying still, which was good. I needed that. But then I started, I got outside more. I made it a daily habit, a daily practice to walk our dogs outside. And I found that to be one of the most healing things for me. Feet in the grass, them running around, birds singing, slowly just taking my time on these walks. Sometimes my husband, when he didn't have to work, he'd be with us. But that became a daily practice, and that started to fill up my cup a little bit more, right? Because I was really depleted, and we get depleted through trauma and pain. And then just finding other things that helped. So sitting with myself for 2 minutes at a time. I started getting Reiki treatments done, which is just energetic healing in the body. I started connecting with Source, with Spirit, the God of my understanding, however I want to label that and however I want to connect with that, because that was my cup, my joy. And now that's really what I pay attention to. So when my mom was still here on this earth, she was definitely and still is my best friend. And I just thought she was absolutely crazy, because one day she was like, you know what, Keri, I want to get on a spin bike. I really want to try a spin class. And I remember looking at her and be like, Mom, you're crazy. I did one with my friend. It was awful. We lasted, 10 minutes. And I was like, get me the F out of here. But she loved being outside too. She loved biking. She loved that kind of stuff. She never had the opportunity to get on the spinner bike. And when I think of that, it makes me really sad. But man, that moment when she said that to me has just stuck with me. And I don't know when or what or how, but I just remember being like, you know what? My mom said she wanted to get on that spinner bike. I am going to get on that spinner bike. And it was a couple months after everything happened. And I got on the spinner bike and I started taking spin classes, and I found an instructor that I really, really enjoyed. And it just like, that was time where I was no longer in my headspace. I kind of started to drop back down into my body, and I felt my heart, and I felt, the sweat, and just, I'm here, I'm doing this. I don't have to think about anything else. And then I fell in love with it. And my husband and I, we've just literally been going with the flow of our life. We kind of needed a change, and the universe has continually to set us up. I believe that the universe sees all, and she does not judge us, but she knows when we're moving from a place of love. And if that's where we're at, she will get us to where we need to go. We moved to Midland, and I remember being like, where am I going to spin? Seriously, like that was the only question I had. Like, where am I going to work out at? My friend, who actually was the one who got me to love spin classes, she was like, have you heard of Alignment 8? So just a little disclosure, Alignment 8 was already created before I stepped through the door. But I remember stepping through the door and getting on the bike and having that first spin class in a new environment. And I was like, man, I freaking love this. And it just felt so good. And when you've gone through pain, grief, loss, trauma, all the human experience in the depth, to feel joy, it's like the light just shone on me, and I was just like in my car dancing. I can't wait to get back there. The second time I walked in, one of the teachers was like, hey, do you teach spin? Because at this point I was spinning certified, so just backtracking, but loved it so much I became certified. I was like, I am spinning certified. And they offered me a job to start teaching there. And I just was like, wow, this is incredible. And then I started teaching there. And the woman who had started Alignment 8, she no longer wanted it. She was just going to either sell it or close the doors. And I thought, I want to buy it. So I had both no time and no money, because I was now back to work. At this time, I was doing nutrition education in Saginaw County for MSU Extension. And we were just newly married and just a lot of things going on. But for some reason, somehow, some way, my gut and my heart were just screaming this, yes, 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 trust it, trust it, trust it. You can do it, you can do it, you can do it. So again, I don't have a background of business. My background was in dietetics, science, nutrition. However, they just set me up for like professionalism and all that stuff. But, again, owning a studio was nothing I saw for myself. But I followed that gut instinct. I got out of my head and I just trusted, because I knew okay, this is healing for me. So what is my intention? What is my intention with this space and buying it? Healing, healing, healing. How can we heal? How can I say, I see you, I feel you, you're here, you're important, right? Because from my experiences, it's when I haven't felt that, from other people, that is not what I want to do. That is how I do not want to show up. So how do I show up? Okay, show up with love, show up with support, show up with excitement. And how can I not be excited? I'm living a dream I didn't even know could be a reality, and I love it every single day. So we have spinning, and that's how I started, was with the spinning certification. We kind of evolved more into TRX and strength and PIO, and then I actually did the Teach to Transform Trauma Leadership. I wasn't yoga certified at that point, and that's when I started. I was like, okay, yes, I need to be a yoga teacher too. So it's just kind of been these stepping points. And then I got through my yoga teacher training, and then positive psychology came into my life. So all of these things are just setting me up so I can be supported, united, and whole. And as I work on myself, that's how I can better show up for each other, our community, our village. Because something I think about is I am not able to sit with someone else's discomfort, no matter how much I want to and I intend to, until I'm able to sit with my own. So this process, this slow, sustainable process, has just been setting me up for now where I am.
I love that story about how you got into spin, because I've thought about it multiple times since I've been on the bike, since you told me that. And so you would definitely be making your mom proud. That's a definite. I can tell you that. Just you bring a lot of light into other people's lives. And so I just hope you know how much impact you have. So I have a couple more questions. I'm going to ask them, see where we go.
Ask away.
So I think one thing that can happen when people experience trauma, on one hand, right, you wish maybe it had never happened, right? There's just this constant wish that why did it happen? I wish it had never happened. But on the other hand, as I hear you tell your story, I hear so many wonderful things that may not have happened if you hadn't gone through that. And so that's not to say that there wouldn't have been wonderful things without the trauma, right? Like who knows how that I think of like Back to the Future and like the parallel timelines or whatever they call it. But I'm curious, how do you think through that wish that you hadn't experienced that, or maybe you don't have that wish, I don't know. But how do you balance those things? 'Cause I think that can happen to a lot of us who have experienced real tragedy is, life would be better if this hadn't happened.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. I go through that, and not as much as I used to, but God, why can't my mom and dad be here? Why can't my mom and dad be here? Why did this have to happen? Why did I have to lose everything, And I can get sucked into that. Like I can get dragged into that, but I got to get myself out of that. What is real? What is reality? Where am I in this moment of now? What do I have now? Gratitude is one of the biggest things that helps me stay here, stay grounded, stay on this earth, and want to show up is, what do I have today? And I am truly grateful for all of it. This is a conversation me and my husband have had many, many times. It's like, man, what would it be like? What would it be like if they were still here, if this didn't happen? And I think about it, and I think something else would have happened, maybe even more horrible. I don't know. Again, we're working with dysfunction and alcoholism and shame and abuse and some sort of catastrophe. But at the same time, too, so I'm able to hold space for all these things, right? Don't limit yourself to like having this box. That's it. We can hold space for, okay, that sucks. I wish it could be different. But this is my reality, and I have a lot, and I'm very grateful. And one of the things this darkness, right, this trauma, it is not the tomb, right? It is the womb. It is the creation of something, new life. And I believe in our soul's strength. And I believe that in a really weird way, we sign up for what we're going to come in here and experience. And again, I'm not discrediting or diminishing the pain we feel in these experiences, but I am celebrating the fact that we are so strong and so resilient in our spiritual self, and the body too. Like we're both, and we live in this dual world. There's pain and there's joy and there's light and there's darkness. So when we remember that, okay, this really freaking sucks, and I would do anything. I would do anything to have my mom and my dad back. Anything. But I can't, because look at what I have. That's not real. And look at all that I have now. And on a spiritual sense, again, yoga's given me this spiritual growth of, they're still with me. They're just not here. I'm stuck here. So I got to do the work. And this is my life. And for the first time, I'm turning 32 in 3 days. And I think literally the best gift I'm going to give myself this year is I'm going to love who I am. All of it. All the mistakes, all the failure, all the shame that I carry from my stuff. I'm going to just love her so much this next year. And we'll see what happens. And that's all we can do. This life is a gift, but the world we live in is raw and dysfunctional And it's also really beautiful. So just learning to take care of yourself and learning to kind of let go of what we wish would be or was, and just holding space for what is. And again, if we're in a space of darkness, just, it is not the end, right? It is a new beginning. I use this reference a lot in class because I just think it's so valid, the metamorphosis of a caterpillar to a butterfly. And when you watch this, which I encourage everybody YouTube this, because it is such a crazy, just painful thing to watch, this caterpillar coming out, and you almost think she's going to give up. And that's all of us, right? We get into this despair, this pit, and we want to give up. But if we just stick through, we know we're going to get out on that other side some way, somehow, someday. Like, it is going to happen. And when we get out of there, something much more beautiful emerges.
I love it. I love it. So good. So that actually is a really good segue into kind of my last question on this topic. To your point, right? It can be really easy to think that the darkness is going to last forever, right? Like, this is never going to end. I'm always going to feel this way. And so my question, and I guess maybe you've shared some pieces of this, and maybe you'll just say the same thing in a different way. That's totally cool too. But where for you have you found the most hope, the most goodness out of just a really terrible experience?
Oh, that's a good question. For me, like, I now see my parents in a whole different new light. Like, I see them as human beings, and I'm better to really appreciate them. Again, even with the humanness and the dysfunction, but it's like they had trauma, and they had trauma right from the get-go, from the moment they were born. And I didn't know that until recently. So for me to hold that for them, it's like, wow, I am seeing them in a whole new light. They went through a bunch of pain, trauma, dysfunction, disorder, all of that, but somehow, some way, they still gave me and my brother such stability, such love, such support. They would have done anything for us. So then I also think about their loss, and it's like, maybe, again, did I sign up for this? Maybe. I can see my soul being very ambitious, like, yeah, I'm gonna take that on, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. But to lose them both at the same time is a gift, because if my dad was in prison right now, I would be sick. Like, I couldn't live through that. So to lose them both at the same time, they gave me this gift of independence, which I think is what every parent wants for their child, is just to say, I am here. I have their love and their support. It's on a whole different level. And again, 5.5, 6 years into it, I'm still learning what that's like, and being able to find that and sit with it and meditate with it. But it's just seeing things in a whole different way and learning to see the beauty in all of it, and just understanding this is just a web of everything. Everything affects everything. So if I want to untie this knot, if I want to make sure that what I'm rippling out into this world is my legacy, is their legacy, I need to show up with love in my heart. And again, I got to empty my stuff out before I can sit with somebody else. And I'm not here to put my stuff on you, but again, just to say, I understand. And so I get excited, I get fueled by the people that have come into my life, whether they're there to stay or whether they're just passing through. There's just so much we can learn from one another and share with one another and support one another. So I think before this, I lived life from a space of limit and more on the ego side of life. So, not seeing things as we're all interconnected. But now I see life more of in a space of an abundance. Like, there is room for all of us to show up and to grow and to have our life in whatever path that might be. And just to understand that we're all on a different path. But if we intersect, can it be friendly? Can it be supportive? And, just to show up with love in your heart. I don't know. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, that was great. All right. Trying to decide where I want to go next. So I think before I ask you my last question, I want to pivot and ask you the question that I've been asking everyone lately. Is what do you have going on in life right now that's really energizing for you? We've been spending 45 minutes talking about working through sadness. I want to know what lights you up, what energizes you.
Well, this right here is totally awesome. Like, I'm still in awe of, like, someone really wants me just to come and speak with them. That's so cool. So thank you, Amanda, for that.
Of course.
And everyone who's listening. I get excited by what I get to do every single day. It changes every single day. Again, in awe of how the universe works. So one of the things, like, I love the studio and I feel so privileged for every single body that gets to come through the doors. But something else that I think about is who isn't here? Who isn't here? So I get energized when I get to have this awesome studio, awesome in the sense of my definition of awesome, but that I get to, work and love and play there, but then I also get to go out into the community and do other things. So right now I'm at the Midland County Jail and I work with the female inmates on every Friday. So that's been scary, but scary in the sense that it's filling my cup, because it's like this new adventure that just returns me home in a way. Like, I am a supporter of the underdog. So to be with the underdog, because I am an underdog, and to say, you know what, you have it within yourself to rise. So I'm working with them, and then I'm working with the ARC of Midland, so women with a lot of intellectual disabilities, and they have been through a lot of trauma in their life. So to sit with them and to share space with them and to hear their story, and that gets me energized. I don't know. I feel, again, like it's taken a while to get where I'm at, but I'm feeling more joyful. I wake up, I love to see the sunshine. I love to sit and watch the birds, listen to the birds. Like, the simplest things fill up my cup, but I think that's really what we need right now in this world, is just to simplify and come back to our roots, sit on the ground and let the sun just be on your skin, find a book for enjoyment. Something I've been doing are non-negotiables, which, so that means every single day I give myself these gifts. It's 5 minutes minimum of meditation, making sure I have some form of movement, because that gets me excited and it makes me feel real and here and me. And then also music. So I noticed when I was going through, my stuff, that those are things I didn't do. But I need music. I love music. I love to dance. So, and just taking on opportunities and, surrounding myself with people who fill me up and being okay with, saying no to things. I think that's huge. We're trained to say yes, like, oh yeah, sure, okay. And then it's like, I don't even want to go. But say no. And, no one else has to understand it. But again, if we're moving and navigating through the heart, you're okay. And I'm okay. So it's going to be okay.
Absolutely. So that being said, we have come to the end of our time. Any final thoughts that you want to share with those listening?
Just, learning to love yourself, appreciate yourself, see yourself in a new light. We all have biases and lenses on, just learn how to take one off at a time, see it, feel it, appreciate it. It is so unfortunate, the things that we have to go through in this life, but it's through those experiences and having the emotions that come through those experiences that we learn to evolve, we learn how to grow, we learn how we have it within ourselves. And as we take on ourselves, we're better able to show up for each other.
For those of you who want to connect with Keri more after the episode, I will link up to her social channels in the show notes. So make sure to check out Alignment 8 Yoga and Cycle in all the places, the Instagram especially. And with that, Keri, thank you for coming on the show. For people listening, we have rescheduled this probably like 3 or 4 times. So Keri and I are just excited we finally got to make it happen. So thank you again. Yes, the studio, but even more so, you are just a real asset. Seems like such a non-emotional term, but you bring such joy to our community, and I am so glad that I have had the opportunity to get to know you. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Amanda. You are a joy as well.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. If you like what you heard, make sure to jump over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. We appreciate the feedback, and it helps other people find the show. On that same note, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend. As always, if you're looking for more resources to go from surviving to thriving, check out our website at www.markjeweltraining.com. That's Jewel with 2 L's. And you can find us under Mark Jewel Speaking and Training on all the major social networks. Remember, survival is dead. It's your time to thrive today. See you next week.